Hi, everybody. This is our second presentation in Business 670, the Tillman School of Business at the University of Mount Olive's course on strategic management. Tonight, we're going to hear from an outstanding team of scholars about their strategic assessment of the Harley-Davidson case. Wow, boy, what a great company. So with that, I think what I'd better do now is turn the host responsibilities over to Wendy Proctor. And I have just done that. Wendy is now your host.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rooney.
You're
I'm going to go
welcome.
ahead and share my screen so everybody can see it.
That's a good idea.
Okay, everybody can see it?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
But Wendy, can we
Yes.
ask everybody to mute so we don't have those issues that we had last night?
Oh, that's
Absolutely.
a really good idea.
If everybody can mute not only your Zoom device, but also make sure that you mute your cell phone, that would be very helpful. Has everybody had a chance to do that? Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. This presentation is going to be a little bit different because we were using Prezi to present it with. And so we hope that it's going to keep you awake. And if possible, we'd like to wait till questions to the end because we want to make sure that we get through this since there's bad weather in the area. So if you have a question that can wait to the end, that would be great. We'll go ahead and get started now. Harley-Davidson Strategic Analysis. This is our team. We've got Jenny, Mary, myself, and Lisa. We're going to start with looking at the Harley-Davidson timeline. At age 21, William Harley developed a blueprint for an engine for a bicycle, and that was in 1901. In 1909, Harley-Davidson Motor Company develops the first V-twin motorcycle. 1917, Harley-Davidson sold motorcycles to the U.S. military, and they also trained the military to use these motorcycles or to repair these motorcycles during World War I, which was very important. In 1931, Harley-Davidson and Indian are the only U.S. motorcycle manufacturers, so the two of them had a monopoly. In 1953, Harley-Davidson celebrated its 50th year in the U.S. as a manufacturer, and it remained the only U.S. manufacturer for the next 46 years. In 1969, Harley-Davidson actually merged with American Machine and Foundry. In 1981, Harley-Davidson's management team purchased back the company from AFM. So they are again in ownership. 1987, Harley-Davidson was listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And then we became, Harley-Davidson acquired the Eagle Mark Financial Services. And this is important because they started offering finance and insurance services in 1995. In 1998, Harley-Davidson opened its factory in Brazil to assemble motorcycles. In 2011, they opened operations in India, but it's important to note that their operations in Brazil and India were only assembly plants, not They didn't actually create any parts there. They were shipped from the U.S. Okay. And then in 2012, Harley initiated a new system called the Harley-Davidson Operating System. It was a system that used the Lean system to improve their efficiency in their factories. Okay, so that's the timeline again. Now we'll move into the products. In 2016, when we look at revenue, 74% of the revenue was gained from motorcycle and related services. So the majority of their revenue is gained by motorcycles sales, and 26% of their revenue was gained by financial service. The top selling motorcycle is the touring motorcycle, and the cruiser is next, and the Sportster comes in third place. Okay, we're going to take a look now at the 2017 Harley-Davidson lineup for their motorcycles. And we're going to start with the Sportster. The Sportster is a sporty entry-level bike, and it runs $8,000 to $12,000. Then we move on to the Street, which is an urban entry-level bike that goes from $6,800 to $8,700. The V-Rod is known for its V twin engine, and it runs $17,400 to $19,000. The Dyna is a custom design with a V twin engine, and it runs $13,800 to $16,700. The Softail, as you might guess, is a classic Harley with extra shocks to give it a smoother ride. It runs $15,000 to $20,200. The Trike is Harley's three-wheel option, and it is going to run $26,000 to $36,000, and you'll see more stability with this bike because of the third wheel. Your Touring, which is the top of your line, is $19,000 to $27,000. That's your greatest sales. And the CVO, or the Custom Vehicle Operations, is running $25,000 to $41,000, and you're paying extra for that customization. All right, let's move on and talk about our mission. Our mission with Harley-Davidson is going to change. We're looking for more of a multicultural, multi-gender focus. We're going to continue to provide high-quality cycles that are dependable and affordable, but we also want them to be eco-friendly and conservative on either gas or if we're going to use electricity. Now, when we start to look at Abel's model, we start with who will be served. Historically, Harley has served Caucasian men over 35 with greater than average income and living in the United States. What we want to move to in the future is what we talked about with our mission, is we want to start moving toward women, non-Caucasians, living in the United States and internationally. Now, let's look at what types of motorcycles we're looking at for Harley-Davidson. Historically, we've had recreational riding vehicles and customized expensive motorcycles. In the future, we want to change our focus to a more affordable transportation and look at some energy efficient options for transportation to meet some of the needs out there. Why? Harley-Davidson historically is known for its quality, dependable vehicles or motorcycles with superior engines. That's their stick with the competitor. That's their edge. But how are we going to meet? How How will the unmet needs be met? Well, we know that there's the unmet needs are that international audience. So we're going to look at continuing to have superior product design and engineering, but we want to look at fuel-efficient engines and domestic and international marketing to women and non-Caucasians. I'm going to move on to the vision. We want to be a strong competitor in the international market. What we want to see is in every major city globally, Harley-Davidson cycles driven by women and men of every nationality. And that's our focus or our vision for the future. And this vision will profit all of our shareholders. So, looking into the rainbow, we're going to, in the future, we want to enter the electric bicycle market, and we want to move from a domestic to a global market. This project was a pilot project that Harley-Davidson initiated about 2014, and they're looking at electric bicycles. This is a picture of their actual prototype of their initial offering, or their initial design, excuse me. They're not actually on the market yet. They're proposed to be on the market at 2011. The problem is that they haven't gotten the battery size up so it will sustain 120 miles, and that's their goal right now, is they need to work on that. There are also already electric bikes on the market that are able to handle 120 miles plus on a battery, so that is their current goal. The problem with that is their projection is 2021, excuse me. Okay. Now, this is a slide that talks about the world market for electric vehicles. And what you can see is actually in all areas of electric vehicles, we're increasing. The LSEVs are the low-speed electric vehicles. They look like a small Prius. And then we've got the e-motorcycles and the e-scooters. And what you can see is the projections from now until the future of 2026 show the growth in all of those markets. Okay, now when we start looking at the Harley-Davidson dealerships over the past few years, what we see is all the distribution channels have no growth, with the exception of Europe and Latin America, with minimal growth. And we know that that is an issue, and we'll be discussing that as we move through the presentation. This is the marketing issue that we know we have. We've got a bad boy image. Women are only seen as passengers, and we want to change that. This is what we're looking for the future, is more of a multicultural, multi-gender, inclusive environment for our marketing. We'd like to concentrate on positive efforts, such as the Siren Milk Riders, who deliver donor breast milk to the New York City Milk Bank to babies in need. That would help change our image to promote some of that. Okay, I've finished my initial part. We're going to move on to the environmental analysis, and I think that is my teammate Jenny.
That's correct. Thank you, Wendy. So the next section, we'll talk about the environmental aspect of the growth for Harley-Davidson. So when we think about the environmental assessment, we want to consider what the external drivers are in the economy for the markets that we want to serve and that we currently serve, and how that's going to influence the company's performance and potential performance. So on this first slide, we have the indicators for economic growth. And of course, all of these were pulled from the IMF website, and we're going to look at the gross domestic product as well as the gross domestic product per capita and the purchasing power parity, which Dr. Roney has discussed pretty frequently throughout the lectures. So when you think about purchasing power parity, that compares how many goods and services an exchange rate is adjusted for a unit of money and how much can purchase in different countries. And the nominal GDP, because you'll see that in different values.
Jenny,
Yes.
you didn't explain to us how the countries differed back there on that last slide.
Yeah, can you go back, Wendy?
There
I'm
you go.
sorry.
Yeah, I still have a lot to say on the slide.
Whenever you've got a slide that shows significant differences like this, whenever you're able to make sure you explain to us what the significance for Harley is. And of
Absolutely.
course, there are some pretty important significances here.
Definitely. So thank you. And the way we've got it, Dr. Roney, is Wendy is driving for us. My computer that I use is pretty slow, so she's going to drive.
Yeah, I think you can just tell her when to flip the slide.
Okay.
Thank you. That was my fault.
All right. So again, the GDP, and we're looking in this first chart in the upper left-hand chart there. Basically, we chose 6 different countries. Well, that includes the European Union. But this particular chart shows the growth with the purchasing power parity considered. And you'll notice that the United States and the European Union have been pretty steady, kind of along the same trend. But what you'll notice is the red line, which is China. And you're seeing some significant growth there for China. I threw Mexico in there just as a kind of a side piece, and you can see they're pretty flat and remaining at the bottom on that chart, as well as the next chart over to the right. The U.S. and the European Union pretty much lead the GDP as far as the global considerations. As far as India, you'll see on the left there, you're seeing some growth predicted for the next 5 years. So as we get into our presentation, we'll talk more about how India is probably going to be considered as far as sales and promoting sales for Harley-Davidson. And I'm trying to think if I've missed anything with those top 2 charts.
Well, I think one question that almost answers itself is just where do you see the most significant growth opportunities for Harley? And I think you've got sort of a two-sided coin there. In one case, you've got the size of the economy, which is the largest, or which ones are. And then you've got the question of consumption potential or spending power. And I think that you see some pretty stark differences there. Maybe you just want to, I won't say it so you can say it, but it sort of stands right out for you.
Yeah. So as far as your purchasing power, definitely China is going to be your powerhouse. And again, India is predicted to increase over the next 5 years.
That's the size of the economy.
Yeah.
And of course, that means that there simply is a lot of power there in raw economics. When we look at purchasing power per capita, we realize that China and India are not as impressive as they are when we look at the total or the aggregate of the economy. But what we do see in that red line in the upper right-hand corner is it's moving. It's starting to move up. And so China is going to become a great big consumer economy. And yes, indeed, you know, that does have a real significance for Harley. They better get their stakes planted there.
Exactly. And that's why we're really, we've talked about this during our team discussions, that Harley seems to kind of not be leading in those areas. And they really are going to have to make some good pushes to start leading. So, and the other two charts on this slide talk about the unemployment rate and the inflation rates. And I tried to use the same countries kind of throughout so you could see, of course, the most important ones anyway are the US, China, India, and Japan, and then, of course, the European Union. So with the unemployment rates, you're seeing in 2008, with the recession, basically everywhere, including the European Union, saw that depression. But you can definitely see that the purple line for the U.S. In 2008 took a dive after climbing since 2005, 2004 timeframe. And that makes a difference with Harley's plan, because if you've got a higher unemployment rate, then you're going to have less disposable income. And so the ability for these folks to purchase these products is going to be less. So, and then the inflation rates, you're looking at India kind of flatlining, but being at the top with those 6 areas considered. So again,
if the inflation rate is high, that would probably suggest that it's going to be more difficult. We don't see a lot of purchasing power, or what the GDP per capita is an indication of consumption potential.
okay.
And now we see that if there is any potential in India, the prices of the things that they need more than motorcycles is probably going to make it even more difficult to afford a motorcycle. So India is a promise yet unfulfilled.
Yep, that's right. And so again, just our overall summary here with these slides is we really want to concentrate on the global market. Yes, the U.S. is a front runner. However, China and India are both showing potential. I believe that covers everything on that slide. On the next 2 slides, and I know Dr. Roney, these are a couple that I think you really wanted me to highlight for 2006 through 2015, and it shows the GDP per capita, which we just talked about. The upper left shows the U.S. You can see, of course, that depression after the recession has continued to grow since then, up to 51.6, and I believe this is in millions. The upper right is the European Union GDP per capita, and you're seeing the depression of 2008, and then you're seeing a little bit of a drop, but a continued increase since 2014. China is in the lower left, GDP per capita, and China is seeing a steady increase since 2006. So for the last 10 years, there's been an increase with China. So again, that's part of the reason we're considering them as our target. India is in the lower right. Same as China, you're seeing a steady increase since 2006 with their GDP.
We just need to pay attention to the scale. So when India gets to its highest, it's $1,750 in US dollars compared to $6,500 in China, and what is it, 38,000 in Europe and 51,000 in the US.
Right.
So again, the trends are promising. The levels, on the other hand, put us back in touch with ourselves. It's a little more sober.
Right. Exactly. So on the next slide, again, we've got more of the GDP per capita from 2006 to 2015 to show the individual trends. For Japan, we're seeing 44.6 is the top out there in 2016. So again, think about that scale that we just mentioned. India is a much poorer country, so those numbers are a lot less. And over to the right, Brazil, we're seeing, what is that, 111.59, I believe. I can't quite see that. I'm looking on another screen.
It's 11,159 for Brazil. And again, the scale is compressed. You can see that the top isn't much different, but it looks a lot. It's 11,797. So from 11,8 to 11,150, not that great. Now, you got to be careful. These data are prepared by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, and this is the FRED system, the Federal Reserve Economic Database. And these are not purchasing power parity. So sometimes you get a little curveball here, but we'll pretend that there isn't any curveball. And pardon me, Jenny, for butting in. I'll try to minimize that. But I would ask you, when you look at Brazil and Russia here, do you see anything about Brazil and Russia that you didn't see in China or the U.S. or Europe, for that matter?
For the China and India specifically, there's more stability. Is that kind of what you're looking for there?
Yeah, and they're growing steadily, whereas Russia, because of the sanctions against Russia and its dependence upon petroleum in its economy, we can see that in recent years, Russia has really stumbled. And because of its turbulent politics and its rapid inflation, Brazil has also stumbled. Now, both of these countries in prior years were looked upon as very attractive targets for international expansion. And in fact, Wendy's already told us that Harley's built a plant in Brazil. Unfortunately, Brazil didn't reciprocate.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, these graphs are really telling about, what's happened in the last 10 years and kind of what we expect to keep happening in the next 5 years. The next slide is the world population. Again, this was pulled from IMF, and this is in millions. So I've got Japan, Mexico, Brazil, we threw Nigeria and South Africa in there to kind of give another perspective. Population of Nigeria seems to be escalating and is projected to grow at a pretty quick rate, whereas some of the other countries, Japan, Mexico, are kind of stagnant. And Brazil, you're also seeing a population increase predicted. And again, this is a 21-year span that we're looking at. So population matters because you think about the workforce and ability to produce, again, increasing wealth. So these numbers are important and have to be considered. On the next slide, I didn't forget about India and China for their populations, but we wanted to kind of see them on a separate graph because these are our babies, I guess you would say. So China and India, just since 2000, you can see a huge increase and a steady trend with their population. So again, predicting more wealth, more ability to produce. So that's why we're wanting to target those areas.
In fact, these are not predictions. These trends end in 2014, right?
Yeah,
so,
2000 to 2014.
Yeah, whereas your prior slides went all the way to 2021.
Yep, that's right. So historically, these numbers speak for themselves. That's right. And these came from the World Bank. On the next slide is the U.S. real disposable income. And I kind of mentioned this already, but this is an important slide because the U.S. and other countries, we have to look at what kind of money do they have to spend on these products. And this slide goes all the way from 2000, I believe, to 2016. So this is, again, historical data. But you're seeing in 2008, you can see a slight decrease till 2010, but since 2010, pretty much a steady increase on the RDI. So this is promising. However, we're still wanting to tap into some other markets. So on the next slide, this is our European disposable personal income. This is 2007 to 2016. Again, historical figures for the European Union. Kind of similar to the U.S. with the recession in 2008. You're seeing a dip there to 2010, but then a steady increase all the way up until October of 2016. on the disposable income. So that is promising, and I think Harley should look at what they can do in the European Union countries, especially since those customers are especially using bikes for personal transportation. So that's an untapped market that we could potentially use for growth. Okay, this is the U.S. Industrial Production Index, or IPI. And this is another economic indicator that we got off of the FRED that measures a real production output of manufacturing capabilities for the country. So basically, what can the U.S. produce? And this
maybe more importantly, who's producing it? Would you imagine, now we know that Harley riders come in all varieties, but it's industry where the wages are higher. You can get paid a lot more per hour if you're working in a steel mill than you can if you're working in a McDonald's, right? So industrial production implies industrial workers, and there are a lot of folks in industry who make more income than folks who wear white shirts and ties. Or whatever the ladies might wear. But in any event, if you were talking about Caucasian men as the traditional rider in the past, they were males who had who had probably gotten into middle age or so. They sent the kids off to school, or didn't have to go down to the jail on the weekend and bail their kids out of jail any longer. They could spend their money on their own personal requirements. And if they've been working in the mills long enough, they're making some pretty good bucks and they want to buy a Harley. But in 2008, there weren't as many people making those big bucks anymore. And that was probably pretty rough on Harley. But now we see that in recent years, things seem to have gotten better, although there's a little wiggle on the right end there.
Yeah, and that's what really concerns us for Harley. You know, since 2014, there seems to be some kind of decline there with the IPI. So that needs to be addressed, and quickly. I don't think it takes long for companies to go under these days. So that's important. But on the next slide, we talk about capacity utilization, and this rate, this is for the U.S., again, historical from 2000 to 2016, and this measures the proportion of potential economic output that is actually realized by the country. And this is displayed as a percentage. So, again.
And it tells us the same story that the one that we just looked at. If we look at this going far enough back, now you got a pretty good span here, but over 80% usually means that the industrial sector of the economy is at full tilt, and there's a need for more machinery and equipment and more industrial capacity. You can see that we've reached down to the point now where we're, give or take, we're roughly 75%. When we're down in that level, there's not nearly the demand for machinery and equipment and additional manufacturing capacity. Thus, again, not as many people are being employed in high-wage jobs. So with these two charts, with industrial production index and capacity utilization, we get a picture that for everybody in the audience and everybody's information, this has attracted the attention of economists throughout the United States and even the world. The U.S. has become remarkable for its sluggish industrial economic activity as opposed to the consumer and the service side. And this, by the way, is what the Trump politics, part of that is all about. Trump is saying, I want to bring it back home. I want to have more industrial activity in the U.S. Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat is not the point here. The point is that U.S. industrial activity is historically low. And that happens to be part of what current politics is churning over.
It's interesting, and that definitely plays a part of what's going on here. And I really think it's unique that as you look at the IPI and the capacity utilization, you see the same, almost the exact same trends as far as the years. So it all really goes together. And on the capacity utilization in 2014, again, you're seeing a dip from about 78% to about 75%. So again, those years really do kind of match up. The next slide is U.S. new car registrations, and this goes from 2012 through the end of 2016. And this is the number of U.S. new passenger car registrations. So we start in 2012 at about 700. I guess this is in thousands, and we're going down to about 550,000 at the end of 2016. So what does that tell us? Less people are registering for cars?
Well,
that wasn't a question, I guess, but I was just making a statement.
Whoa. Give it back to us, Wendy. Thank you. We talked about this in our team meetings. Does anybody else on the team recall why we're looking at this chart? Okay, we don't have in the data a chart like this for motorcycle registrations. It's just not kept. Jenny, are you remembering? Do you want to pick it up now?
Yeah, I remember you saying that. And so since we can't track the new motorcycle registrations, we're kind of using the new car registrations as a comparison to kind of give us the same feedback, right?
Yeah, it's called a proxy. Okay.
Proxy.
There we go. That's the word. Yeah. The market analysts often are put into this perplexing situation where we can't track our market activity because there just aren't any records. So the next best thing to do is try to find something that is tracked that behaves the same way. So when you're buying one of these expensive Harleys, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but some of those prices will really knock you off your chair. You probably don't buy those with pocket change. You probably finance the purchase of a Harley the same way you finance the purchase of a car, right?
That's right.
And you're gonna, now people drive cars to make a fashion statement as well as to go to work. But there's a whole lot of Harley that's fashionable as well as, I mean, the folks who ride Harleys probably are not riding them to the office. But there's enough of what Jenny called a similarity here that we get the idea. And lo and behold, we're going to see that what's been going on in auto registrations, in fact, has, I think we'll probably see a chart later, but the registrations of motorcycles in other parts of the world and so forth, those and what the sales of motorcycles, and especially in units, which is what we're looking at here, those trends will be very similar to this one. So this gives us some insight now into what's been going on in the U.S. market anyway, assuming that what drives auto purchases is, by and large, what drives purchases of Harleys, which are expensive motor vehicles.
Yep. And that's exactly right. So that's my main point on this slide is the same economic drivers of auto purchases tend to drive the purchase of motorcycles, especially since, you know, with Harley's prices, they're pretty much the same, if not more, as a vehicle. Yeah. And a lot of people nowadays are using public transportation. So that could be by and large a part of the reason that these registrations are going down, public transportation, excuse me. And, you know, you've got folks that will ride mopeds. You don't necessarily have to have a license to ride a moped. And
Jenny, when I was your age, for the price of one of those Harley touring bikes, you could have bought a house.
Yep. That's so true. So we got our point across there. Thank you, Wendy. So the next slide is the U.S. motorcycle trends. And in the pink, you have the number of registrations. This is all historical data, by the way, from 83 till 2001. you've got the U.S. motorcycle registrations and the miles of travel. So in pink, you've got the registrations, and the blue, you've got the number of miles. And since 83, registrations pretty much went down for about 15 years and then started to creep up after about 99 to 2000. And then the number of miles have seemed to pretty much stay consistent since 83 to 2001. Okay, so our summary here for the environmental factors and the economic drivers of Harley-Davidson, we're really focusing on performance potential. Inflation and unemployment rates have been huge determining factors, and will continue to be as far as which countries Harley wants to focus on and which ones have the best profit potential. The wealth of India and China are improving. We saw several slides that prove that, and that creates potential untapped markets for Harley, and is represented by the improved GDP and increased population in recent years. Disposable personal income is on the rise for the U.S. and the European Union, again suggesting some untapped profits still in these countries for Harley. But we want to end on the note, global trade and industry production will continue to impact Harley's profit earnings and must be met with creative cost-cutting solutions and target market reach. So they need to focus on what these markets need in terms of products and how they can stay on the cutting edge to meet those needs. And I believe the next slides will start with Lisa.
Yes, we're going to talk about Porter's 5 forces. This is kind of to capture the profitability and the strategic priorities within the motorcycle industry. You know, who are your players? Who's the potential newcomers? What about the copycats? The bargaining powers from the dealers and the suppliers. The threat of new competitors. Here we're talking about resurgence of India. India motorcycles, I believe in 2003, stopped their production. Polaris came in 2011 and bought up Indian Motorcycle. The U.S. market for large motorcycles, saturated. International is not. There's a higher demand for smaller motorcycles. Again, you've got fixed cost, break-even point are high. Capital cost of equipment and manufacturing facilities are high. Larger markets, nations with a strong government regulations to control. India and China, we just heard about that, is high. The sales have decreased since the recession globally as well. And the conclusion from this slide, the barriers are high, the threat is low. And we label this as moderate to weak force. And the threat of substitutes, we labeled it moderate force. The external factors, kind of for the copycats, the substitution is high. Product substitutes, where you've got the scooters, mopeds, the lighter bikes, rather than the heavyweight bikes. Alternative forms of recreation, camping, boating, hiking, ATVs. Travel options, if they're not purchasing, they're doing cars, public transportation. And then your various substitutes appeal to different age groups, the salary incomes, and the culture. Conclusion from this is the threat of substitute is also high.
Does anybody here have teenage kids?
I do.
Yes.
What do you think or anybody in the audience for that matter, but what do you think if you could go back to the substitute slide, What do you think your kids feel about riding motorcycles? Do any of them ride a motorcycle, or do any of them want to ride a motorcycle?
I have an 18-year-old boy. He would love to.
Does he?
No, I'm a nurse.
My sense from reading the marketing information is that folks in the Generation Y and the current generation, some may be excited about riding a motorcycle, but these days there are other things that excite American teenagers and young adults anyway, other than motorcycles. Now, of course, a Harley is kind of expensive for a teenager to buy, or even a young adult. But I think this last point about different age groups and income levels probably is going to have a role to play in the way Harley decides on its marketing strategy in the future. I don't know whether those of you who have teenagers or those of you who are Generation Y, for that matter, might feel about it, but that's the sense that I get from the literature anyway. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think the Generation Z, it's going to be pretty hard to appeal to them with heavy bikes. Harley's going to have to reconfigure the way they look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to ride a hog through the city. You can do it. Okay.
Okay, next is bargaining powers of buyers. We label this as a weak force. The external factors that contribute to a strong bargaining power. The manufacturers must sell through the retailers. The franchised or dealer is also important. Switching options are strong for customers. Switching cost is moderate for dealers. It reduces their power, and fewer producers than dealers reduces their power as well. And conclusion from this is buyers have limited power, moderately low. And the bargaining power of suppliers we labeled as a moderate force. The external factors for this to create a weak bargaining power. Suppliers are large in number. Suppliers provide mainly the commodities, parts. Suppliers also include the labor unions and banks that also have high power. Long-term deals or contracts promote stability for that relationship. The conclusion, component suppliers have limited power, but banks and unions have higher power. Again, this is moderate.
Just very quickly, if supplier power were really high in some particular part of the value chain, what would be a logical strategy to respond for that? We've already been told when the five forces were introduced, and that was a really good touch, that we do it for two purposes, right? To identify the profit potential of an industry and also to identify strategy priorities. Now,
Right.
Let's just assume that it were difficult. Maybe there weren't that many manufacturers of wheels, that you put the tire on. And in fact, there aren't that many. So supposing you were Harley and it was sort of difficult to lock in a good supply of wheels, what do you think you would do?
We go in the wheel business.
You'd vertically integrate, right? The response would be vertical integration. And maybe you're going to tell us that Harley actually has its own wheel plant somewhere in the world. We'll see. Okay. Do they?
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. Okay.
Okay, this slide just kind of combines the last four that we just discussed as labeling the forces from weak, moderate, and strong. The product life analysis, you can see here you've got the timeline and you've got the demand. starting off with India, China, Japan, Europe, and US. And you can see US is on the decline, where the rest are kind of at a rise going forward. Critical factors, you've got the yays and the nays, the success or the engineering, the R&D, the quality control, the manufacturing efficiency, the product line depth, width, and the strong financial position. On the other side, you've got the failure factors, where you've got the high cost structure, the weak position outside of the U.S., and the lack of economy products. Competitors, we've got Harley Davidson, Polaris, Honda, Yamaha, and BMW, and I've kind of labeled them according to the four: differentiation, cost, leadership, cost focused, and then differentiation, cost. And then here you've got your sales figures for each of them.
Lisa, pardon me. On your last slide, I wonder if you could explain that at all. You've told us where you've got Harley located, where Polaris is located, and by Polaris, I think you probably mean its Indian motorcycle division. You got Honda and the
Yes.
Focus. Is that focused cost, and BMW both differentiation and cost? But you've got quite a lot of information here. Can you elaborate on it at all?
Well, the Harley Davidson, it's hard for me to say, differentiation. That branding is strong. It's product quality. You also have advertising and promotional support. So that's kind of why that stands out. Your cost leadership with Polaris, they have used their technology to their strength, their production process, having lean product methods and high levels of productivity. Then you have your depreciation cost, where that's your classic strategy, ensuring the customers to provide what they're needing, what they're wanting. And then your cost focused is really about cost with Yamaha and Honda.
So again, I'm trying to get the sense of this. Honda and Yamaha, if we read your diagram correctly, are focused on the portion of the market that seeks a more affordable product.
Right.
They're not looking for customers who want to buy hogs. Is that right?
Right. They're more cost conscientious, I should say. It's kind of get from A to B.
Okay.
They're using a standardization plan.
Good terminology there. And now BMW is looking at that surprises me. But you characterize BMW as making a motorbike that is unique. It has added value, but it's also made at a sufficiently low cost that they can be price competitive. Is that correct?
Not so much as low cost. They may be a little bit less than Harley Davidson just because of, I guess, their style. It's not somewhat compatible to Harley Davidson.
Okay, so because they're making a smaller bike in Europe, perhaps it sells at a price at an average price lower than Harley.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Whenever we get to a slide, it makes sharp differences like this. We need to explain to the audience exactly what's going on here. Otherwise, they're just looking at a piece of artwork. So,
Okay.
Pardon me for interrupting, but for everybody in the audience, you really want to remember that point when you're making your presentations. You know, that very often a slide is meaningful only when you explain the so whats. All right, away we go.
Okay, and then here are your sales figures for the competitors. I don't need to read through those. Okay, so Harley Davidson versus Polaris. To kind of try and do the two. Harley Davidson is your brand name. You've got, customer loyalty, your capabilities, manufacturing efficiencies. It's custom to what the customer wants, but yet it's premium pricing. Polaris, you've got the technology behind it. They're continuing improving their line, their operational line. They've got multiple products on the motorcycles, ATVs, and snowmobiles. And then here, this is just an example of two different styles that are actually compared. You've got the 48 model against the Indian Scout model. The 48 is 67 horsepower, 70.8 foot torque pounds against 100 miles per hour, horsepower, and 72.2 pounds. And then the gas mileage, you can see Polaris has a larger fuel tank, 3.3 versus 2.1, which is going to do a fewer stops on your trip. And then Harley Davidson is an air-cooled engine versus Polaris with a liquid-cooled engine. That meaning it's going to last longer, more constant power as you're going down the road. And then here, just to kind of give you an idea of retail sales, comparing the two, Polaris is going to come out the winner on that. They're just in a better position on the retail side versus Harley. Long-term outlook, Polaris is set to experience higher revenue growth over the upcoming years. International performance is about a tie, and stock valuation is also a tie. You can see that Polaris was 15.9 versus Harley at 12.3.
Jen, where did you guys get this information, Lisa?
This was from, let's see if I have my source.
Okay, the stock market valuation we really don't care too much about. And if we did, Polaris would cause a problem because it makes a lot of winter sports stuff like snowmobiles and the sort. If you could go back a couple and show us those financials, we went right by it, but we go one back and again, there we go. So we've got Harley now at about $6 billion and Polaris at about $4.7 billion, a large part of which is snowmobiles. Now the operating profit margin for Harley, I think probably is not 278%. That would be impossible.
I think we missed our decimal point.
Okay, so it's 27.8%?
Right.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so that indicates that Harley is the more profitable, as well as the larger. Now, Polaris is more successful financially than rates of return. So you have a bit of a mixed bag, but there's no doubt about it that Polaris is sort of coming up behind. It's interesting to take a look at the rates of return for the two Japanese companies, which are both a lot larger and less profitable than the Americans, which is really unusual because in the auto industry, it's the other way around. But with that in mind, if we go back now to that first point about retail sales, there we go. Next one, yeah. Okay, so retail sales, Polaris being the winner. I'm just wondering what you guys had in mind there.
I think it's the overall product line versus just the heavyweight motorcycle line.
I think, Todoroni, or what you're getting at is the total sales on that one chart. Obviously, we got Honda leading by a great deal. Yeah.
Oh, that includes cars, you know.
Yep.
It's not Polaris, you know, it's Indian. Polaris owns the Indian motorcycle brand that was a company, as you pointed out.
Right.
And Indian is a very popular product. I was really impressed by the comparison that you made in a previous slide. It looks like, you know, that Indian Scout really is a hell of a machine. And you mentioned earlier that Indian prices more aggressively, and I would expect that's true. And I could even sort of see your point about the long-term outlook in terms of growth potential. But I was just wondering if you could give us any more explanation here on these on the first 2 points, because it's a little confusing. Now, of course, internationally, Indian doesn't do much at all outside the U.S.
I think what clouds the figures is the fact that these companies do more than just a motorcycle, so it's very hard to pick out the individual sales.
On my next slide, I actually have those comparison figures.
Sure.
This may help. Just the two, and you can see that Polaris is on the rise.
Yeah. What you've got here is stock market stuff like price to book and market cap. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't use these data in these strategic assessments. Some folks do. If you were at another business school, they might not have the problem with this that I do, and I need to be honest about that. The issue here is what portion of the stock market performance is attributable to the company's management and its financial results, and what portion is outside of management's control. And the problem here, of course, is that the stock market is often rational, but it's not always rational. And the stock market behavior is nothing that we usually look at in this course anyway, in terms of what management is doing strategically. So the net income is relevant, though. And we see that Harley's making a little more money than Polaris is. All right.
Okay. And here you can see the motorcycle sales throughout. You know, U.S. is strong, but you can see that 2015 we were a little bit less. For the full year, it was a negative percent, 3.9, which was not good. The fourth quarter worldwide retail sales of new Harley motorcycles declined 0.5% versus the prior year.
And Lisa, I don't want to jump in, but I just want to reiterate a point that I made earlier. Latin America hasn't done so well.
No, yeah, they're the largest at negative 13. Yeah.
Yeah, remember when we saw the inflation rate in Brazil?
Right.
Here it is now. Where is the growth? Where do you see the growth? Now you got the international total versus the U.S. and Canada, which Canada doesn't really matter much. You got U.S. declining 4%. Internationally, we got growth of 2.25%. In Europe, Middle East, and Africa, we've got 6% growth. Damn. Okay. And in Asia, we got 2%. And those are big markets, one of which is large already. That's the 6%er. And the other is the one with all the potential. That's the 2%er, but they're both a whole lot better than minus 4%, aren't they?
Yeah.
So this confirms what we saw in the economic charts, right?
Yeah, it does.
Okay? That the economy, the data are showing us where the opportunities are in terms of, you know, what's driving sales. And now here they are in real life for Harley. And if Harley's managers aren't picking this message up, then they need new management, but I'm quite sure they have picked it up. This is a very telling chart when you put it together with the economics. And thank you, Jenny, for breaking us so we could pick up on that.
Yeah, no problem.
And then next you see the motorcycle sales in declining sales in quarter four of 2014. We were high, and now we're at almost negative 6% in the second quarter of 2016.
Ooh.
Yeah, not looking pretty. And then this is the other related products with Harley Davidson. You can see, and I've outlined or circled, highlighted, and we discussed this previously. The operating margin percent is 0.4 in the change, and then a little bit over, you can see the change at negative 1.8% or points.
These are changes, of course.
Correct.
In the, let's see, is this operating, I'm trying to pick up on it again. Is this, these are operating profit, are they? What are the numbers?
Operating margin, yeah, percent.
Well, I don't see the percent. I see dollars and percent change. These are not profit margins. These are changes, and it says revenue up at the top. So I'm assuming these are shipments in the top line. It's in, and I guess it probably is all millions. And it looks to me also like when your exhibit was prepared, the fourth quarter and the full year column headings got moved over to the left, but the fourth quarter is above the first two, 2006-15, and the full year is above those on the right. So you've got annual changes and quarterly changes. So, but what we see is declines in motorcycle sales in the fourth quarter. Wow. 12% decline in motorcycle sales. That is a serious problem. Now there's your operating margin percent. Pardon me, way down at the bottom. I'm sorry, I did not understand it. And there we've got also what appears to be a little increase to a 1% operating margin, but in the fourth quarter because volume was so low, whereas it drops by 1.8 percentage points for the full year. And the gross margin roughly comes down a little bit. So our takeaway is what? The sales are down. Profitability is what?
Down.
Yeah, it's down for the year, that's for sure. The operating margin is. Okay, I think I interrupted you when I shouldn't have.
No, that's okay. All right. And then Harley's sales versus shipments. You can see from quarter 3, 2014 through quarter 2 of 2016. It had a dramatic drop in quarter 2 of 2015. A 2-year decline, so to speak. The uptake on the change percentage in shipments was on the rise, where the change in sales is declining. And here's your BCG matrix. For your Star, you've got your custom. For your Hilo, you've got your Sportster, your street rod. For your Hilo, your touring cruiser. And then the Burrell motorcycle, kind of in the doghouse. And then here,
Buell isn't in the doghouse. It's in the morgue.
It's just very, very slow.
It was discontinued. They quit making it. Okay, it just failed, and the significance is that Buell, and another one that we're going to hear about later, I believe, an Italian company. Both of these acquisitions were unsuccessful, and eventually Harley-Davidson just had to give up on the Buell, and it stopped making it, golly, I forget how many years ago, but I'd say 5.
5 years, because it was acquired or
It was a very good motorcycle. It had a lot of good reviews, but they just couldn't sell enough of them to make money.
Right. Okay. And then here you can see your countries outlined as to where they should fit within the matrix. And Europe and or India is on the rise. That's fine. Wendy, go ahead. And then here, just to kind of see or gauge where they think they're going to be in 2020 as far as their equity value.
Okay.
Okay, now we'll move on to capabilities analysis, and that's actually Mary Ann.
Okay,
Who's doing it?
that's me,
Mary.
Mary. You can move to the next slide, Wendy. Okay, so we're going to start with motorcycle unit shipments. From this slide, what you'll be able to tell is that between 2015 and 16, there was a decline in domestic shipments, but on the international side, there was actually an increase of 4.9%. So therefore, Harley-Davidson needs to make more of their focus on the international market, but at the same time, they need to develop more efficiencies in their domestic strategy. Okay, on this slide, we're looking at the worldwide unit sales. As you can tell from this, the international market is increasing just a little bit, but the domestic market has dropped. Okay, these are our top 3 selling bikes. As you can see, the Sportster is the lowest selling bike, but if you can look from 2013 on to 2016, there is a slight increase with the selling of the Sportster. The Cruiser is kind of staying the same, but then our Touring is actually declining. Okay, here kind of goes back to where Wendy had all her bicycles laid out. This is another thing that just shows us the price range of all the families of motorcycles. And then also we talk about the top selling is, of course, our Touring. Then our Cruiser, which is part of the Dyna family. And then our Sportster comes in third. And it is also priced next to the lowest at only $8,599.
What does VRSC mean?
Where's that?
Can somebody help us with that?
Hold on, I think I have that.
Oh, I'm sorry. One of you guys told me.
Yes, I looked it up. I'm so sorry.
VRS.
VRSC.
Oh, I see what
The
you're saying.
V-Rod?
Yeah, that's the V-Rod.
The V-Rod.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the
With the new engine.
big engine.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, on this slide, we're going to look at units sold by region. So you can tell the United States is far outweighing the rest. There's 161,658 billion. Then the European region comes in second, followed by Asian Pacific. Okay, on this slide, we're looking at the dealerships. We got all the way back to 2006, but the main focus here is going to be between 2015 and 16. And as you'll notice, there's a decline everywhere except for in Asia Pacific region, which was the only one that had an increase in dealerships in 2016. Okay, this is the revenue product line. As you'll see, the motorcycles are 78.2% of Harley-Davidson's revenue. Their parts only equate to 16% of their revenue, general merchandise 5.4%, and other 0.4%. Revenue trend. Okay. The main thing on this slide we need to look at would be between 2008 and 2009. As of course, it was a U.S. recession, revenues plummeted, but they gradually grew back by the time 2015 hit. Again, they dropped again and got flat. One of the key things to point out here, I'm sorry, I'll point that out later. Go ahead, I'm sorry. Okay, so here's our financial trends. Again, you'll see the operating profit margin basically did the same thing as the revenue trend. It dropped in 2008 with the recession, as well as the return on investment and the return on equity. Sales dropped as well, but then gradually grew back up and again dropped off again in 2014, or excuse me, 2015, between 14 and 15. Long-term debt. This was where I wanted to make a point. So you'll see a huge increase between 2007 to 2009 in long-term debt. Harley borrowed $2.3 billion from the federal government. This money was used during the sluggish recession to provide retail loans for motorcycle buyers and wholesale loans to Harley dealers. Shareholders' equity, you'll see a steep decline between 2014 and 2015. This is because Harley-Davidson issued $750 million of senior unsecured notes in an underwritten offer.
Those notes would have been partially responsible for that debt that you showed us. Let's make sure everybody's got this clear. Can we go back to the debt chart? That would be 2 back. It will just take a minute, just a short minute. That's equity? Okay. Now, as you pointed out, Harley took part in the bailout. But
Right.
it's somewhat interesting that in the last 2 years, Harley's picked up another $1.5 billion of debt. Okay, we kind of wonder exactly why Harley is taking that debt. Apparently, from what you showed us a moment ago, their profitability is okay. Their profit margins have come up a bit, but their sales have come down. And it may be that this debt is being used to perhaps modernize manufacturing. I think we've heard a lot about cost reduction through some new technology, but there's a sizable amount of investing going on here. And then when we look at equity, next slide, next slide, next slide.
I'm trying.
Thank you. This is a real, garter snapper. There's something here that if you've got equity dropping by 1/3, either Harley is buying back stock or it's issuing more dividends than income. But I believe you mentioned that the equity was going down because of debt, and that is not true. But rather, we've got some reason for, and again, usually what makes equity change is earnings, profitability. The profits are retained, and they're called retained earnings in the equity portion of the balance sheet, which makes the equity go up until dividends are paid, or stock is bought back, or new stock is issued. We look at the rate of return on equity to see what the growth rate is before those other things happen. I just wonder, do you guys have any insight as to why the equity dropped so precipitously here in 2015?
Well, I said the company issued 750 million of senior unsecured notes in the third quarter of 2015 that was utilized utilized to proceed the funds to repurchase common stock in the third and fourth quarters of 2015.
Okay, so they borrowed money to buy stock back.
Yes.
All right, and that would make sense. Okay,
Or I may have not said that clear the first time.
okay. Now here we have the total of debt and equity. All right, go ahead.
Correct. And again, you'll see where it says added 3 billion in 3 years. Of course, we're back to the money that they borrowed from the government during the recession. Wendy?
I'm sorry.
Okay, this slide here, I just wanted to compare long-term debt versus equity, just to see it on the graph together. Again, we just looked at those two slides separately. Okay. Harley-Davidson's financial risk is relatively high at 73%, and that is phenomenally high. Even though the company is they're still in good standing, but their debt, their leverage is just really high. 73% is not favorable by all means. Okay, this is a comparison of Polaris's leverage, Harley-Davidson's leverage, and Honda's. As you can see, Harley's is substantially higher than any of their competitors. Polaris is kind of on up there in that last year, 2016. But other than that, Honda's is actually kind of in a good range. Okay, this is our CSF report card.
Just for a moment, just real quick, why do we care so much about leverage? I mean, the financial numbers are always interesting. We have to remember that they are a language that tells a story, just like, grammar does. So we always, whenever we look at numbers, it's very scary when we just look at the numbers and we don't hear the story. What is the story behind leverage? Boy, there is one. First of all, you used the right term. You said risk, financial risk. Basically, you've just told us that 73% of Harley's capital, invested capital, which is made up of just debt and equity, has come from debt. And as we've talked about in the meeting, if Harley gets in any more trouble, who's going to be in charge? Harley's management or the bank?
The bank.
El Banco, right. Okay. Now, aside from that being risky enough, supposing that you're right and that Indian gets aggressive strategically and it starts to attack Harley, what kind of resources does Harley have to reply, to fire back? And even if it has some resources, how much risk can Harley afford to take? For instance, if it makes a move, a counter move against Indian or BMW or Honda for that matter, and that move fails and their leverage runs up to 90%, it could be that they're a takeover target, right? When you get leverage this high, it forces management to be much more conservative because it's already taken just about as much risk as it can stand. So when we've got a leverage ratio of 73%, that puts a whole new context on rivalry. The firms that don't have that kind of financial risk are able to be much more aggressive than those that do. That's part of the story here. Harley's got a problem. Okay.
Okay, this is our CSF report card. As you'll see, we went through, we rated Honda, Polaris, and Harley. Unfortunately, Harley did not come out on top. as we rated them a C due to a low rating in research and development, as well as a low rating in their sound financial position due to that high leverage. Polaris got a B minus, as well as Honda. So we kind of put them on the same playing field, but we did bump Harley down a little bit below them. Manufacturing locations. As you'll see on this list, the very first one, the first two are in Wisconsin. The first one, motorcycle powertrain production. The second one is plastic parts production and paint. You can read the rest of them. The main thing I want to point out here is that Harley does own a motorcycle wheel production plant in Australia. And also the two plants that are in overseas, which is Brazil and India, they only assemble the motorcycles. They do not manufacture the motorcycles.
Right.
Again, this is just a graph showing the key manufacturing facilities. 60% of the motorcycles are produced at the Pennsylvania facility. And then it shows the two international facilities as well as the product development center in Wisconsin.
I used to live in Milwaukee. The name of that town is Wauwatosa. Yeah, and it is a suburb of, it's like Goldsboro and Mount Olive.
On this slide, we have our strengths and weaknesses. For our strengths, we have excellent product assurance capability, Harley owner groups, the largest market share of women who ride motorcycles, design engineering, developing lower price motorcycles. We have the new products, the street bikes that are made to appeal to the younger riders, as well as production engineering, customization of motorcycles, and a very lucrative for Harley Davidson. For our weaknesses, we have overdependence on the U.S. market in dealers and suppliers, limited international dealers and sales capability, limited international market research, manufacturing facilities mainly in the U.S., actually only in the U.S., because like we just said on the previous slide, the international facilities only assemble the motorcycles. Part of this reason is probably because of the cost is higher than the foreign competitors, but also Harley bikes are considered American made. Maybe one reason why they have not put a facility overseas for manufacturing. And then last but not least, we've got research and development. They are late to release their new electric bike, Livewire. Why Harley motorcycles are so high priced? They're U.S. made. They are assembled in the U.S. Parts come from all over the world. U.S. manufacturing is more expensive than manufacturing in some Asian and Latin American nations. There is high cost associated with customized motorcycles. Harley motorcycles are differentiated and therefore they are priced higher. Okay, this is the BCG matrix. At the top, you'll see we've got U.S. as one of our cash cows, as well as Europe is in there, very small, but they are in there. Then we also have, over here with our dogs, we've got the Middle East and Africa. And then Brazil is kind of teetering on the line between a dog and a venture, more so maybe on the dog side. Then we also have Australia and Asia as a venture. Okay, then we're going to come down here and we're going to look at the bikes. We've got the Cruiser and the Touring as our cows. And then as our venture, we have the Street Rod, and then the Sportster is kind of moving over to the Stars from the venture area as the sales in that is growing. Okay, and then on the last part here, we've got our cash cows is our 35 years of age and younger, white, wealthy. Then our ventures are our young adults, 18 to 35. And then our stars are going to be our minorities and our female women.
Okay. Now, every once in a while when I interrupt, I have an ulterior motive. And I won't tell you what it is quite yet, but as you know, there's going to be a discussion question, right? And sometimes my interruptions are meant to focus on those things. But you notice that Harley needs a star in the way of a product, and it may be generating one.
Yes, sir. That's coming later. You will see something on that
Okay.
later.
No. That's all you had to say. So what we have, we were talking also earlier about those older Caucasians, right, who are wealthy. What do we know about those older white guys?
They're dying off.
That's it. That's right.
Maybe we know.
I was going to say they're getting older, but yeah.
They're croaking, you know. So, anyway, you know, they're buying more stuff for their hemorrhoids. You know, it's a little harder to ride that Harley over, you know, when it goes bouncing around. So it becomes you got to wonder about what these graphs are telling us about Harley's market potential and what kind of marketing problems these BCG matrices are showing us. But that 35-year and older white wealthy circle, that's a great big one. That takes up a big space there on the chart, and to the extent that it's at risk, Harley still has this marketing problem, doesn't it? I'll just get out of your way now. I think that's pretty important.
Okay, we're going to move on to organization structure. Harley-Davidson's organization structure is based on the company's aim to ensure centralized control of business activities. Organizational structure provides limited support to the company's potential global expansion. Harley-Davidson has a functional organizational structure, which is where the organization is divided into smaller groups based on specialized functional areas such as manufacturing, marketing, and engineering. I don't know.
Did we go backwards there?
Something's happened, Wendy.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going backwards.
Like way backwards.
Let me see if I can just catch it up. I'm not sure. It may be because of the weather. I might have lost some internet. And is that where we're supposed to be?
We're right there. Yes, ma'am. Okay, advantages and disadvantages of Harley's organization structure. Harley-Davidson's organizational structure provides the company with strong control of all business activities as well as ease of monitoring changes in the market and corresponding business performance. However, Harley-Davidson's organizational structure also has disadvantages such as low flexibility and handling differences among markets as well as poorly supporting initiatives of regional and multinational operations. Resources: capital, physical, human, and technological. Worldwide dealership network. The brand has a strong reputation of quality, performance, and reliability with the riders. Hog network. Close relationship with key suppliers. Computer-aided design and manufacturing. Their plants are capable of managing multiple product lines.
What's the Hog network?
That is the network that gets riders together, owners of Harley, to do rides. They also do all kinds of different things. I saw on one thing where they do fundraising. It's a network of riders.
Yeah, HOG stands for Harley Owner Group.
Right.
Okay, and this is probably one of the most impressive marketing vehicles that Harley has developed over the years. And there are hogs all over the United States, And remarkably, there are Harley owners groups in India and Brazil, where they have their assembly plants, in India most notably, and Japan. So but where Harley has really made great inroads into the market, or the vehicle that it's used to make those inroads, has been these Harley owner groups. It just, you can imagine when people become parts of these groups, they're probably not going to change motorcycle brands anytime soon. And when they need their next one, it'll probably be another Harley.
That's where some of our pictures in the vision came from, was these Harley groups, the hog groups.
All right, so the summary: while domestic sales are declining, international sales are increasing. Sales and operating margins are steady. Return on equity and return on investment and return on equity have declined greatly. Long-term debt is substantial compared to previous years. Shareholders' equity is the lowest it's been since 2000, and leverage is extremely high at 73%.
Okay, we're going to move on to speaking about goals.
Who's speaking?
I'm going to, still me,
Okay.
Mary. Okay, this is our goals hierarchy. Even though our risk is 73%, we still think that is acceptable for the time being. Our financial position is stable. While it's not the best in the world, it is stable. Our favorable market position, we have a good market position in the United States, but it's unfavorable in other countries, which is where our priority is. This is where we want to make some changes and get our market position in the international industry higher. Long-term growth can be realized by developing the new products and markets. Okay, this is our financial. All the data for these come straight from the value line reports. As you'll see, sales, profit margin, return on investment all increase. Equity declines some. Long-term debt declines.
I'm sorry. Let's flip back there just for a second, please. I'm not sure, but you may have said equity is declining. I think what we want to recognize is that because Harley's equity went down so sharply, and the way we calculate return on equity, it's net income divided by equity at the beginning of the year. And the way we calculate equity at the end of the year is we add net income during the year to equity at the beginning of the year. So return on equity is a growth rate before we do dividends, stock sales, or stock buybacks. So return on equity is a growth rate. And although this chart shows the rate of return on equity coming down, when you're growing shareholders' equity at 34% a year, that's not chopped liver. And the reason it's going at such a high rate is because equity was so low, right? So the numerator is going up. We can see that from the operating profit margin, okay? But the denominator went down, and it's still really low. So we have a growing numerator and sort of a small denominator, and no surprise that this fraction is high. I mean, it's at 38% last year. But to say that the rate of return on equity is coming down, in this case, is not a negative remark, because if we're growing shareholder wealth at 34%, the shareholders aren't complaining about that. And although we don't care about stock market behavior in this course, that is one reason why Harley stock's been doing fairly well. But if we were looking at this thing, say, for another 5 or 10 years, what we would probably imagine is that the rate of return on equity would still come down for a while. But as long as it's up above 25%. We've got happy shareholders. All right.
Long-term debt capital will decrease as equity goes up. And finally, we see our leverage start to go back down as Harley pays off some of their unsecured notes that they have. Goals table worksheet. The main thing you can take from this, or that I found was very interesting, was that the leverage decreased by 33.8 points. Sales increased by 42. Equity increased by 69. And again, this is between 2016 and 2021. So it's a big increase, but you got to remember too, it's over a long span of time.
Just a quickie, you may wonder why this form of table. Not all companies do 5-year plans, but strategic plans, more often than not, the large majority, usually have some sort of this is absolutely not a necessity, but a very common format is a so-called 5-year plan. And so the reason we're doing the graphs and this table this way, and as you point out, from 2016 to 21 is 5 years, is sometimes it's a 4-year plan, sometimes it's a 5-year plan, but it's in that ballpark. And so the purpose of this, in case some of you start to do work on strategic plans in your companies, this would not be an unfamiliar format, and that's why we're doing it. Okay, thank you.
This was a graph taken from Forbes. Basically, it was their projection of Harley-Davidson revenue forecast. As you can see, the orange is the motorcycle revenue, the red is their financial services. Again, it's kind of in line with our forecast, showing that the revenues do increase. Summary of the financial goals. Harley expects to have substantial increase in sales and operating profit margins over the next 5 years. Return on investment increases while return on equity decreases. Equity increases as long-term debt decreases. Capital decreases while at the same time leverage finally drops below 50%. Things begin to look better for Harley-Davidson. Finally.
What a great punchline.
At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Wendy.
Okay. We're moving on to talk about our international market share. Our theory here is go global or go home. One of the things that we've noticed, or that is in the environment, the world environment, is especially in Europe, they're becoming more and more incentives for being environmentally friendly. And so the e-bicycles will be more profitable, or people will want to buy them more because there are incentive programs to get reimbursed for these energy efficient vehicles, especially in Europe. And I would foresee that that's probably going to continue to spread across our world environment. Okay, this is what we're looking at again at our BCG matrix. And what you need to know here is we're missing something, and that's the star. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, that's what we need. Okay, so our conclusion here is Harley-Davidson is needing some work on their current strategy. We need a star. We need a high share of a fast growing market to survive. The star of the future, we feel like, is the global electric bicycle market. And we also have a quote from Navigant Research that is talking about that they agree that these electric bicycles in the congested urban areas are going to be the wave of the future. When we look at our strategic objectives, we are focusing on a focused differential with added attention to the foreign urban markets, like we've said, offering energy efficient, affordable motorcycles and electric bikes while maintaining our quality standards. Least cost is not a strategic objective for Harley-Davidson. It's a differentiator. But best cost is an objective, and excellent quality at the lowest practical cost.
I think I may have helped you with that language. We want to make sure that we don't think that least cost is a differentiator. Back there in that comment, Harley-Davidson is a differentiator. That's the kind of strategist it is, rather than a low-cost strategist.
Yes, sir.
Wow.
Okay, we're going to move on to strategy. Danny?
Yep. So the strategy for Harley-Davidson moving forward, what we want to think about is expanding globally, differentiating our products, and if you look at the next slide, we put together Ansoff Matrix, which is a planning tool that managers use to strategize for future growth. So you'll notice we have products and services listed at the bottom and our markets listed across the top, and we'll go from existing to new. So with market penetration, the organization Harley-Davidson is going to grow its existing offerings. But for market development, which is more of our focus, this is where we're going to expand into new markets, geographically, talking about India and China and so forth. The product development piece, that's also where we're moving towards, diversifying product development and reaching new market groups. We talked about the non-Caucasian over 35, so females, minority groups, and others is where our main focus is going to be. And we can use things like the HOG groups that we talked about that Harley is doing well in, and just kind of expand those to reach those other groups. I think that's going to be key. Maybe we can come up with some new HOG groups just for women and for other groups. So that's the Ansoff Matrix for product, services, and markets. All right, so our number one strategy for Harley-Davidson, we're going to identify, develop, and sustain. First, identify potential untapped markets. Again, we talk about minority groups and females. The millennials and Generation Z are going to be critical for Harley's success as the baby boomers start to age out, and as Dr. Roney said, are spending their money on hip replacements and so forth. Develop the new products that appeal to these markets, the electric bike, and what I was really excited about in my research was the technologies that are starting to come out from some other companies, the electronic throttle control, and the accessories. Also, Harley-Davidson can offer those to kind of supplement the bikes and appeal to those younger generations. The augmented reality helmet is really cool, where you can basically answer phone calls and do things. You know, you'll have that vision in your helmet. That's really neat. If you've ever used the 3D goggles, it's kind of similar to that. So that will help to sustain market interest. And through meaningful advertising, a presence on social media will be huge with these younger folks, and creating new ways to stay interesting to the new buyer group. So it's great if we develop something new, but how do we sustain that and continue that strategy? So next, market penetration. So we're going to talk about increasing market share with existing segments, and we're going to do this through diversity. So one of the key strategic objectives for Harley is to embrace diversity in its customers. Targeting new diverse customer groups will allow new product ideas and marketing plans to be discovered and executed. So we had some data that was actually, I think, good through 2003 that I showed Dr. Roney, but we wanted to come up with some more current numbers. So we found this information on the Reuters site. There was an article there. Average age of the Harley rider in 99 was 43.4 years old, 2004, 46.1 years old, and 2008, 48 years old. So what are you seeing? Those average ages are growing over time. And the reason we couldn't find, there may be some other information that I don't know how to access, but in the Reuters article, it did state in 2009, Harley stopped providing annual numbers because they were claiming that these numbers were not a true measure of their outreach efforts. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I was Harley's management, I'd want to keep publishing them either. Basically, supposing in 1999, I was 43 years old. Let's see. In 9 years later, or 10 years later, depending on how you count, I'd be 53. And the average was 48. So the importance of younger riders is working its way in, but by the same token, a large portion of Harley's ridership consists of the folks who have been riders in the past. And some eventually, like we said, those old traditional Harley riders, they just can't ride the motorcycle anymore. That's just, you know, hard to ride a Harley and hold on to your crutches at the same time, or you know. So we've got an aging, an increasing average age. It's not increasing. The average isn't as increasing directly with the number of years, but it's still pretty high. And what Harley's got to try to do, of course, if it's going to grow, if it's going to reach into those new market segments, is see that average age start to work its way back down again. I mean, if the average gets up to 50, let's say that in 2012 it was 50 or 52 or something like that. How, you know, eventually what they're going to have is an average rider who is older, but there are going to be a lot fewer of them because a lot fewer people at that age level are able to ride a bike, right? So this is this again is this marketing problem that Harley has, and it just flows through this entire case. All righty.
Okay, so the next part of Ansoff Matrix was market development. So market development, and that strategy, a firm tries to expand into new markets, which is what we're trying to do here using existing offerings. So that is partly going to be the case, but we also want to introduce new products to those new markets as well. Extend current positions in Brazil, India, and China, where Harley doesn't have plants in China that I'm aware of, but we want to increase our position there. And conduct research to determine consumer needs and product gaps for target markets like Europe, China, Brazil, India, Japan. We briefly mentioned this, considering a joint venture or buy-in of companies that have the technology needed for new products. So we're aware that Harley they're not necessarily on the cutting edge with the technology, and they're trying to play catch up. They could consider a joint venture if needed for that area to kind of bring them up to speed. Okay. This is the Porter's Diamond model, which is basically Porter's Diamond is a theory of competitive advantage, and it was developed by Michael Porter. And it basically tells us, it helps us understand the competitive position of a nation, of the company in national and global markets. We have four.
You just about got that right, Jenny. I was nodding my head, yes. Yeah, Porter developed this model to explain countries' competitive advantages, not companies, but rather
Countries.
to explain the extent to which countries have the sources of competitive advantage, and they fall into these four categories. And you can rate countries, of course, just like you can rate countries for 5 forces, as we've already done. So the purpose of this model is to give us insight where to into a country's competitive advantage. If we see all 4 of these very strong, country must be pretty attractive. If all 4 of these are weak, we ought to look somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. Thank you for correcting me on that. That is the nation's ability, not the company. But we've got factor conditions, which is resource availability, available infrastructure. So that just means, what is available in that country as far as us building plants or distributing or whatever. Demand conditions. So that's going to be how sophisticated are your customers. We don't necessarily want to go to a developing nation and try to sell heavy bikes. Related and supporting industries. What's our presence of suppliers and competition in those nations? And the last thing is the strategy, structure, and rivalry in those nations. And points to remember there are appropriate forms of investment. How can we expand the functional structure into a market and develop a product-based structure and decentralize to achieve more power in global markets?
Just a real quickie for everybody in the audience. Yeah, these are all 4 contributors to countries' comparative and competitive advantages. The term strategy, structure, and rivalry has always been problematic, even for Michael Porter. I happen to have the article that he delivered at a conference when he announced this model. The key item here is rivalry. And it's rather interesting because it does not behave like rivalry in the 5 forces does. In the 5 forces, if rivalry goes up, the profit potential goes down. In this one, it's a sort of an upside down U, okay? And for a while, rivalry encourages companies to raise their game. But after a while, if rivalry gets intense enough, what happens is it's like dogs in the street fighting over a scrap of meat. And it gets real nasty, and companies do all sorts of stupid stuff, cut prices and what have you, and the market becomes very disorderly. So it turns out that moderate rivalry is what you're looking for in a country. Either really low rivalry, because at very low it's a monopoly and there's no incentive to make the state of the art any better. But if the rivalry is intense enough, then the state of the art won't get any better either. Again, this is just a footnote for everybody in the audience. But rather interestingly, it turns out that moderate rivalry is what makes a country the most attractive. Okay.
Okay. So to finish up the strategy section here, the external environment in the global marketplace is our next slide. Okay, we can go with this first. Effects of internal capabilities. So we have positive competency effects. The Harley brand and its reputation are huge. Harley has an awesome brand, and I don't think there's probably anybody in the U.S. that doesn't know the Harley name. Supplier relations are positive for Harley, and plants to assemble knockdown kits in Brazil and India. The negative competency effects are behind industry leaders in product technology. So we just talked about that. What can they do to try and get back in the game, whether it be a joint venture or putting more money into that. competencies that work in the U.S. may not work in global markets. And the upside to that is there are successful hogs in India and Japan, so maybe they can use those to their advantage to try and expand. Okay, here we are in the external environment in the global marketplace. So competition, trying to expand product sales in the global market scene may be difficult if a strong competitor is creating entry barriers. As Dr. Roney said, you know, a moderate threat is a good thing. We do want some competition. We don't want to go in with a monopoly situation and try to sway customers over. And then the economic conditions, Harley needs to choose which regions and countries to expand. We used our diagram earlier to discuss that. Growing disposable income and decreasing unemployment are items to consider. So we talked about in the very beginning, you know, what our unemployment rates are and the disposable income. We need to factor those in our decision as well. And the last is the technological conditions of the country, the availability as far as infrastructure and other things to accommodate production, and what are the consumer characteristics that demand newer products that Harley can offer. And we're going to actually continue our strategy discussion, and I think Lisa is going to take over now.
Right. For strategy, product development, we need to continuous features, technology improvements, going green, introducing electric bikes, product proliferation. We need to produce diversity for the company to capture the market, which could be to bring new products to the market. Trikes could be an example, scooters, mopeds, etc. And then here, product development, here's a list of what Harley currently has to create diversity. Products that we need to bring in, electric bikes, scooters, again, lightweight models versus the heavier models, and then the trikes. And capability enhancements to increase capacity internationally where costs are lower and demand is growing, as we have found out in India and China. Process efficiently, streamline the automated process, retain the variety of the custom features, and design engineering support innovation. Okay. Anybody want to chime in here?
International strategy options. Using a home replication like we've done in the United States, multinational, multiple business models, global standardization, a worldwide system of assets and processes to make and market bikes in the same way, transactional pursuit of a scale economy and local market adaptation simultaneously.
Whoa. Let's be sure we got squared away here. The word is transnational.
I'm sorry.
Okay. And what we really need to do is try to pin down what Harley's international, generic international strategy is. We've got these four choices, and we need to try to pick one. International is the version where we do everything the same way. We make copies of the same business model everywhere we go. So Hilton Hotels runs their hotels the same way all over the world. Multinational would be if the hotels were different all over the world. Some food and clothing companies are like that because cultural tastes and weather requirements make it necessary to just run the business differently in different parts of the world. Global standardization would be the same, would be what we would find in the oil industry or the chemical industry, right? And in that case, the product is the same. Oil or chemicals, by the way, semiconductors too. But we would locate our assets around the world wherever it's most economic to do it and still produce the same uniform product. And we would distribute it in different ways, but always it's the same product. We make it the same way. It's just a question of where we put the assets to do it. And the same thing for the distribution, including the gas stations and including the gas company. Transnational recognizes that any one of these could be the fundamental business model, but market conditions vary between countries, and so there's some combination of these things. And you basically you can make a good argument for international because Harley really has only one manufacturing hub, and that's up in Wisconsin. They've got them in Kansas City and so forth, doing it all pretty much the same way, but it's focused on Milwaukee. Since they have operations in more than one part of the United States and even Australia, you might start talking about globalization. And in fact, they've got plants in Brazil and India, but those plants really take the product made at home and assemble it the same way and then sell that standard bicycle. So we might be moving toward a global model. You could even say, well, you see, it's got international, it's got global, must be transnational. We're modifying things depending upon where we are. You know, depending upon which model you choose, you get some idea of what to expect Harley to be doing in the future. Do any of you guys have any idea? You've thought about this case. Which one of these models best describes Harley?
I think we were kind of leaning towards the transnational. However, we know that that strategy is very difficult to implement. So because you're trying to do both the cost and the differentiation, that we were kind of a little worried about that.
Well, I think you're right. Transnational is very expensive, very complicated. It often is just what happens sort of by evolution. I think Harley starts out as international. I think we see it trying to move to globalization. So you've mentioned that they acquire their parts from all over the world. Maybe some of those relationships will become alliances or even joint ventures. We know they've got one plant that makes wheels in Australia, so we got a little bit of globalization going on there. My guess is that as Harley goes down the road, it'll try to be a global, it'll try to adopt a global model, putting its assets where they're most economical. Right now, if you had to put your chips on one square, I think it would have to be international, not because they do things the same way everywhere, but they just do them the same way primarily in one location, which is in Wisconsin.
Right.
Okie dokie. That's a tough one, isn't it? If I asked an exam question, and I wouldn't be that mean, I will not ask that question.
Good.
Try to select which international model Harley best describes Harley. That could be that would not be a bad question for a doctoral level exam. I mean that's a rip snorter. But that would be a very tough question. But the answer to it gives you an idea of what to expect from Harley. Okay, we see Harley as primarily a home replication model business today. But if you had to make a guess in the future, my guess anyway is that they're going to try to be global. You know, if they make too many different kinds of Harleys for different countries, pretty soon, you know, it'll be uncontrollable. And of course, that's the way the automotive industry is going toward world-class models. Okay, that was a bit of a tangent.
And when we move on to integration strategies, vertical, Harley makes its own wheels in Australia. It makes knockdown kits in Wisconsin and ships them to Brazil and India, which we've already talked about, who assemble the cycles. Perhaps it can make more components in low-cost countries because we know that that would cut down on labor costs. Horizontally, Harley has not been successful with acquisitions in the past, such as Buell and Augusta. Sorry.
They gave it back to the guy they bought it from, an Italian guy. They got it from him and they gave up and gave it back to him.
So strategy conclusions, where are priorities the highest? Increasing the product line through innovation and diversification, expanding globally in new developing markets, growing our supply chain worldwide, and rethinking the product line to adapt to a growing green philosophy. Okay, now we're going to move on to strategy implementation, which I believe is Jenny.
Yep. So our strategy implementation. We're going to talk about the key factors and strategic steps for Harley-Davidson to become an industry leader. All right. So the Harley-Davidson's three-circle. The ideal behind the three-circle system, this is something that Harley's been doing for a while now, was to get the right people together at the right time to do the right thing. So this circle organization is based around the core processes at Harley, which are three things: create demand, produce product, and provide support. And where these three circles intersect is the Leadership and Strategy Council, where shared leadership and cross-functionality are at work. So that's our core. And this has worked for Harley-Davidson since the 90s. So this has been something they've used for a while. All right. Okay. The organizational structure changes required to implement strategy. So this is what we need to do to implement the strategy and make needed changes. Establish overseas manufacturing plant for all international sales, establish more dealerships internationally, and establish more international customers and supplier relationships. Just as Harley's done in the U.S., we want to try and do that in China, India, and other countries that are potential markets, and more research and development funding and teams. Harley-Davidson's greatest strategic challenges in the future. What is going to hold Harley up as they try to implement these changes? Well, the things that they need to do are building distinctive competencies. So they can reduce the bureaucratic costs, which comes with trying to do multiple things, the cost leadership, implementing cost leadership, and product differentiation. Anytime you're implementing these strategies, you're going to probably run into a lot of cost associated with that. Improving the research and development is also going to be key. We talked about the products that they need to try and implement going forward, and improving the market and geographic structure are also the distinctive competencies. So these things are going to be challenges for Harley to accomplish. All right. How organizational design increases profitability. Good organizational design economizes on bureaucratic cost, enhances a company's value chain competencies and capabilities, leads the way to low cost structure and the ability to choose a low price option, leading to differentiate advantages and options of charging a premium price. And all of this leads to competitive advantage, profitability, and superior return on investment. Okay, so the next slide is our key implementation milestones. Product line expansion. Harley needs to invest heavily in research and development and create at least 2 new products that lead the industry in technology and can potentially rebrand the company in those markets. and they then need to test the new products in existing markets, a favorable customer group. So research needs to be done on what these particular markets are and what the demand is from those customers. The market expansion will determine the 5 most promising choices around the globe for expansion through independent focus studies and customer polling, and integrate existing methods to build new manufacturing facilities in those chosen 5 locations. And I picked 5 as a nice round number. It might be 4, it might be 3, but that's the target. And then we want to introduce new product lines in the newly expanded markets and perform monthly research and development to marketing realignment through an appointed team of Harley experts. So research and development and marketing go hand in hand. We can have awesome products developed, but if they're not marketed well, then failure is imminent. And the sole job of that Harley team that I mentioned would be to basically act as a liaison between the research and development and marketing teams, and to strategize and make sure that they're doing well. And I actually believe that we're missing a slide, but I'll talk about what's on that slide, even though I don't know that we have it. It's the historical projects and programs, where it talks about Project Livewire. Wendy, do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll mention it because it does go hand in hand with the research and development. So Project Livewire is the electric bicycle. There's been slow product development. It was proposed to be completed in 2021. I think we did mention part of that earlier, but it's been delayed, and competitors have the superior technology that we need, like extending the battery life. The global expansion has been slow progress. Brazil and India have assembly-only plants, and there are no overseas manufacturing plants. So that's what we've done historically. Future projects and programs are the product diversification, increased production for electric bikes, which is our star, and global expansion, increase the market range, and create strong relationships with complementary businesses. Supply chain, possibly a joint venture if needed. Okay, sorry we got on that rabbit trail. I don't want to miss that.
Sorry, Jenny.
No, it's fine. Thanks. So how does Harley make it to hog heaven? I like that. Play on words. Research and development are key, along with effective marketing and global market takeover. So number 1, we got to start developing the cutting edge products ahead of the competition. And then advertising campaigns need to begin, targeted to specific demographics around the globe. And then the global market takeover is the Harley philosophy must be reborn to realign the company as a global brand, not just an American brand. All right, and we're getting towards the end here. So we'll play some nice music for you guys. I hope you can hear it.
We can hear it.
Okay. I'll turn it down just a little bit so it's background noise, but basically we're playing the Born to Be Wild song by Steppenwolf. The road to success. So we'll go from the past, which is the existing Harley brand. The company has a renowned name in the motorcycle industry and has built a reputation for quality, design, and specialization. As we're moving in the right direction, we want to increase sales to higher prices of some of the bikes and attempt to grow the international market, which would be the desires of the company and hopefully customers if we can target them. So the future of Harley-Davidson, the key will be to focus on new target markets by serving up a foundation of product education, new customizations and products, and new event promotions, all focused on women and other minority groups and the international market. And then we're at the finish line. for participating in our presentation, and thank you for your time. I'm sure there are many questions and discussion following this, but thanks for listening. Dr. Roney, I think you're on mute if you're trying to say something.
Thank you for realizing that. Could you please give me back my power?
Absolutely. I just
Thank
have
you.
to remember. Hold on just a second.
I like this. I like this a lot, and I can tell you a few reasons why. First of all, by the way, are you aware that this thing has taken almost exactly the same amount of time as last night, for those of you who were here? So this sort of seems to be the rut we're in. It would go faster if I quit interrupting you, but you may realize in a few minutes that some of those interruptions had a purpose. But others were just teachable moments or irresistible impulses. But what I really did appreciate is that you stayed on that required outline. You followed the structure, and it was quite clear as you did that. But you did a couple other things. You threw in a few unannounced embellishments there, and that made it your presentation. So you were transnational. You were standardized, but you adapted to the requirements of the case. And so I imagine that you're probably. I think you did very well. Let me just leave it at that. And I think most of my marks here are going to be pretty positive. There were a couple of little things that would have probably added, and I just want to mention those for whatever value they might be. We sort of touched on them on the early, when we were talking about the market. We talked about, we didn't quite say it, but this trend toward urbanization. And in a lot of my seminars and work over the years, including my long-range forecasting work, I have found some really whiz-bang exhibits out there that show what the move toward urbanization is. I think something like 5 years ago, the portion of the world that is urbanized exceeded the portion that was rural. And that trend is going on so that by 2035, the portion will be 70%. It's happening very rapidly. Quite remarkably, it's happening more in other countries than here. We think of our country as having big cities, but the largest city in the world is Mumbai in India. And India is one of those countries where we see a lot of growth potential. As you know, I was in China last year, and I can tell you that they got a bunch of cities that are double the size of New York. So, and what's unique about this urbanization is that the kind of transportation that is required, or the kind of transportation needs, are quite different than in less congested environments. So in Sao Paulo, Brazil, or in Mumbai, and in just a whole lot of large cities, and especially in developing nations, but also in mature nations such as those in Europe. People use motorcycles not for sport like Harleys, but rather to go to work, right? And sometimes they might be called mopeds or mobile. What's the other name besides moped? There's another one.
Scooters.
Huh? Scooters.
Scooters.
Yeah, scooters. Thank you. Okay, and you've kind of you've been bouncing all around this thing, but this new market, the market that's emerging rather than the one that Harley has served in the past, is by definition, almost you can't get around it, is going to be filled with much larger, more densely populated cities where it's harder, among other things, to drive around in a car, and where, because of their low DPI per capita or low GDP per capita, low consumption potential, You know, the largest portion of those populations aren't going to be able to buy Lexuses, you know, or so they're going to buy, they're going to still be buying two-wheeled vehicles. And so the impact of urbanization, along with this trend we see in GDP per capita, seems to spell a formula out for either Honda, which is the largest competitor in the industry, or Suzuki, or BMW, or Indian, or if they get their act together, Harley. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and you may want to make use of those thoughts in the next day or two for a reason I'll explain momentarily. The other item that just occurred to me was how Harley achieves this market penetration that it needs to keep on doing. It's held on to its market penetration, its high share, with this device called the HOG, the Harley Owner Group. That's been the cement that's held it together for years and years and years. And it's the technique that they're trying to use in Brazil and Japan and India. Now, how easy it is to do that is the $64 question. But that cement, those Harley owner groups, they have a home or a whole bunch of homes, and those homes happen to be the Harley dealers. Okay, in order to get it to expand into and to gain this higher market share, Harley's got to keep up. If you look at that graph that we were shown about the trend in dealerships, most of them were horizontal, weren't they? We only saw a little blip up in China, and that's after it had come down, or rather, I think it was Asia. But you know, in order to pull this thing off, Harley is going to have to. And traditionally, this has been the way that these companies and similar types of companies have grown. It's through the dealership. One of the things that you saw in one of your charts was the importance of parts. Something like, I think 20%, 20+% of sales. I can tell you that service parts, repair parts, carry a much higher profit margin than the equipment itself. And so the manufacturers love to sell service parts, and the dealers love to pay for them because they charge the customer even more for those service parts. You know, Harleys break down just like all other products, and they have to be repaired. So these service parts are extremely important, but the only way you can get them to the customer to repair that bike is with the dealer. So the dealer becomes an extremely important vehicle for holding on to market share. Other than that, those are the two major items that I just wanted to offer to you. And I think at this point, what we want to do is two things, or maybe two or three. One, we want to open it up to anybody who's left in the meeting room. There are not as many as the number we started with. And see if there are any questions or comments from them. And then the second item, and I guess there are only two, is I guess I'll tell you before I post it on the Moodle shell what that discussion question is going to be. I see we've got a new friend, by the way. We've got Professor Ward has come to the party today. Hello, Professor Ward.
Hey, Dr. Roddy. I enjoyed the presentation. Thank you so much. I'm sorry I was late. I had a late-minute issue came up with technology, but I was able to get it resolved with support of IT at my internet provider. So I thought your presentation was very well. Enjoyed how you went about following the outline, and certainly you enlightened me tonight on some of the information that I was unaware of in relation to Harley-Davidson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, these guys did a good job. They really did. Anybody else? Jamie, Tara, Renee, Anna, Mark. Good night. Okay.
Well, I
No,
guess I'll break the ice like last night. I'll say first off, great presentation, very creative, very succinct. You definitely did your research and knew what you were talking about. Set the bar really high for us, so thank you for that. But also, I want to thank you for playing the Dr. Kurt Roney theme song there at the end. He's born to be wild, as we all know. But I guess from just the presentation itself, do you see mergers and acquisitions as being a part of this thing? It just seems like the customers are getting older and dying off, however y'all put it earlier. Where do you see obviously the leverage is a problem there for Harley now, but do you see there being some big mergers to keep this industry kind of alive?
I personally think that Harley over the next couple years is kind of at a decision point. I mean, like we talked about, they've been solid for a while, and they're at the point now where they've got to make some changes, whether it be new management, new CEO, whatever, to start implementing some of this stuff. So I would like to say no, because I want Harley to stay independent, but that it might be a joint venture could be in their favor if they need some help with the technology side.
I think Jenny just put her finger on something. It could be that Mary's not going to answer her phone.
Sorry.
It could be that Harley, if it doesn't watch out with its financial risk, and hopefully, if it does try to do an acquisition, it's very careful, because its track record in acquisitions, as we now know, has not been real good. Yeah, I think there's a real good chance that Harley could be an acquisition target. And having been an investment banker in the past, I can tell you that I can think of a few companies right now that might look with kind of drooling chops at Harley as an acquisition target. It could fit in a lot of places very well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's one of the reasons we were looking at joint venture, because we knew that there were not the probably funds available, and to keep us from being an acquisition target.
What a great answer. What a great answer.
Go, Wendy.
If you do a joint venture, you're harder to acquire, you share the risk, and you share the resources. Now that, Wendy, are you the nurse?
Yes.
Damn it. Why aren't you in industry? That was, yeah. If you think you want to get into investment banking, give me a call someday and I'll make some connections for you. That, by the way, is what we would call a really great defensive strategy. Do a joint venture, be undigestible, and acquire access to resources that may get you, into high gear again. That's a really slick move. And by the way, that's all your thought. I hadn't thought of that at all. Nice move.
Wow. Career change, Wendy. Come on.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if industry is better than healthcare right now.
Well, it's a toss-up.
Right.
Okay, since it's so late, I think we probably ought to move this thing to the finish line. In the morning, probably in the morning, you'll find a note on the Moodle shell. I haven't written it out yet, but I can tell you generally what the discussion question is, so you can start to think about it. And for those who have remained in the meeting room, that's your little reward. You get a jump on everybody else, because when the other, let's see, there are 4 times 3, there are 12 people out of 21. That's not bad. That's 3/7. No, 4/7. That's more than half. That's pretty good. Oh no, but we can't count Professor Ward. He's not one of them. So we've got 11 out of 21. We got just almost half. Anyway, here it is. Harley's got a marketing problem. It's as simple as that. Harley's got a marketing problem. So I want you to describe Harley's marketing problem and your preferred approach to solving it. Okay, now in order to answer that question, you're going to have to reach in to some of these slides on the market and the economies and perhaps even a little demographics. We're probably going to have a look at even the five forces to the extent that industry structure and the five forces gives us some priorities on strategy preferences. But really, we're talking about we talked about them. We talked about how people my age find it a lot harder to keep sitting on a Harley than it used to be, and so forth. So the very nature of what is a market? A market is the community of buyers. It is the source or sources of demand. All right. So what is Harley's marketing problem? How has Harley's market shifted? And how has it changed in the past? How is it likely to continue to change? And what is the most appropriate strategy? How has Harley responded so far? And what is the most appropriate response for Harley's marketing strategy going forward? I'm going to have to find a way to put that all in one paragraph, but I will. And you'll find it on your Moodle shell tomorrow. In the meantime, I need for you guys to send me a PowerPoint version of this presentation and do it right away, please, because I will have to convert that to a Zoom file. That takes quite a while. And then I have to convert the Zoom file to a YouTube file. And that goes a little faster, but I'll manage to get some work done yet tonight before I have that on the Moodle shell, but I will do it. And then tomorrow I'll put the discussion question, but you kind of know what it is right now. Questions? All right, who's the first one to ask for an extension? 2 days is what you get to answer the question.
What kind of link?
Because we got 5 of those, don't we? We got 5 of them, so you just gotta sort of, you don't start typing. You think about it and make your outline. What are the key points here? That's when you start to write. Don't write before you think.
Yeah, Dr. Roney, I think Wendy was going to ask you, what are we looking for a specific length of answer? If we can get the meat of it in there, I mean, are you looking for quality over quantity?
Oh, you know my answer, Jenny. You just said it. You just said the answer. Yeah. Some professors, Professor Ward not included, grade by the pound. I do not grade by the pound. So it's definitely quality over quantity. On the other hand, you've really got to do the question justice. I do not think that you need more than 4 pages, okay? What you want are the basic points. Remember, the purpose of these papers is to discuss the principles of strategic management that have been developed in this course, to apply them to the case. The whole idea of doing this case and everything related to it is to apply the principles of strategic management in this course to the case. So you're going to be quoting models. You're going to quote BCG groups. You're going to quote 5 forces. You're going to quote Ansoff's matrix. Okay, you're going to quote the models and the principles in the course. That's what will rack up the points for you. Philosophy, to be very candid with you, going green. Okay, the reason the going green cuts it in this case is because in Europe and South America, in the big South American cities anyway, and in Asia, there are a hell of a lot more electric bicycles than there are in the US. And aside from the low GDP per capita, it's also due to the high cost of gasoline. It's a lot higher there than it is here in Europe. So, the electric, I think you're right. The electric bike's time has come. And Harley is way behind the curve in bringing it to market. and they're going to have to really get their roller skates on to keep up with the market. But
Yeah.
apply the principles of strategic management in your answer. That's the way to get the job done.
Okay.
Okay? And you can, if you focus on that, then you don't need 20 pages.
Right.
Four will do it.
Or even maybe 2 or 3.
Yeah, I agree. Because I got to read this stuff. You're definitely correct.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, are we about ready to say goodnight, or does anybody else want to say something? Going once, going
think-
twice. Sleep? Huh?
I think Mary just sent you our slides, PowerPoint. Can you confirm that you have them?
I will. I'll let you know if I don't have them, because
Okay.
I want to turn this off now, and I don't want to. So sleep tight. Great job, and I'll look for your slides as soon as I turn this off. Bye bye.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks for your help.
Take
Good job,
care.
girls.
Bye.
Good job, girls.